So good at talking until the camera's out. Why is that? Today, we are here to talk about your relationship with the bin. We have a very intimate relationship with the bin, I would say. In our culture, we have such a out of sight, out of mind mentality, which means we throw things away without even thinking twice and without realizing that that thing has a life after. Most of its life happens after you've thrown it away. Our actions have consequences. Things don't evaporate when you throw them away. If we're looking at landfills and the things that are thrown away, the majority doesn't actually come from our house. The majority comes from businesses, and even more than businesses, construction, which kind of surprised me. But as we have much less control over those, I'm going to focus on household waste. In just 1 year, 27 million tonnes of waste goes in the bin from UK households. 27 million tonnes. I found some of the most common. So we have food waste, supermarket food packaging, especially companies like Coca-Cola and Nestle, which, let's not forget, own other companies as well. Plastic bags, plastic bottles, materials which are 100% recyclable, like aluminium and glass, ending up in landfill, which is kind of even more sad. Also worth mentioning is textiles, i.e. clothing. This whole mentality of like single use and disposability plays a big part in the problems of the fashion industries. Also, something worth mentioning is toys. So brands like McDonald's, Kinder Eggs, toys that you get in magazines, toys that you might get in like stocking fillers, just things that are sold that are made to be played with for about 5 minutes. So where does it all go once you throw it in the bin? That is the big question. 2/3 of plastics, which includes stuff we throw away and also stuff that we recycle. 2/3 of plastics gets exported overseas to developing nations. Up until 2018, China was by far the biggest importer of our waste. In 2018, they placed a ban, as they should. So it mostly goes to Malaysia, also Poland, Indonesia. We're sending it to someone else to deal with our problem rather than us, which is not okay in itself. Secondly, we're sending it to a country that has enough of their own problems, a weaker economy than us, a developing nation. But another problem is that we don't know what they're going to do with it. We think that we're recycling, but does the government actually think that, or do they just go along with it because it's off their hands? In reality, a lot of the time it just ends up sitting in sites, often legal sites, just in piles. Now, the problem is that the majority of the stuff in these places will last longer than me, longer than my children, longer than my grandchildren. Styrofoam / polystyrene literally lasts forever, never biodegrades. It breaks down into just smaller pieces of plastic, which is in some ways worse. It takes up 30% of landfill. Sanitary pads, plastic bags, you may have only used it for 5 minutes to carry what you bought to your car, and it's going to live longer than your great grandchildren. There are over 1 trillion plastic bags used each year. Cling film up to 1,000 years, plastic bottles up to 1,000 years. Like I said, there are other materials in landfills like glass, metal, which also last a very long time. The problem with plastics though, it just breaks down and gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and gets into animals, gets into water, gets into the ground, gets into the air, everything. There are direct environmental impacts of landfill sites. When things are decomposing, particularly food waste, it releases gases like methane, carbon dioxide. People who live near landfill sites, it's very common for them to suffer like health problems, liver problems. When a landfill site is completely out in the open, number one, it's open to the elements. So if a storm comes, that waste is going to get dispersed over a very large area. Number two, when it rains, something called leaching. When the water infiltrates through these massive piles, it collects chemicals and pieces of plastic and everything you can imagine. It can infiltrate into the ground and contaminate the groundwater. If there's a nearby river or water source, it gets in there. It just will get everywhere, and it contaminates, causes health problems, is toxic to marine life. The reason why I'm only mentioning them very briefly is because the purpose of this video is to highlight the more big picture problem. The fact that we have too much stuff. The earth is choking on just stuff, and I use the word stuff a lot because it's everything. It's just things that we have for no reason. Because of the way plastic breaks down, it's great for things that we use over and over again, like pipes, window frames, things that are meant to last, because plastic's a great material. It's flexible, it's durable, it's light, it's low cost. However, it's really not great for things that have a temporary life, because plastic is a synthetic material. It's made out of oil. In most cases, it's not going to break down into anything natural. It's going to break down into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, which makes it more and more and more problematic as its life continues. So we have to think, is it worth it for a material that we're going to use for a few minutes, a few days, a few weeks, but it's going to outlive all these generations? Like, we have to start waking up. We can't fully comprehend the amount of waste that we produce every day, every week, every year. It's more than the planet can cope with. It's choking. It's entering every single ecosystem. I went to Italy once and I went up Mount Vesuvius. When I looked at the ground, all I could see was cigarettes everywhere. Our waste is getting into everywhere. Like, it's been reported that these things have been found on Mount Everest. I've seen it in plenty of holidays, like floating in the sea, just patches. I also went to Croatia once and we did a sea clean where we only snorkeled around about like 100-meter area, and we found unbelievable stuff. This was on a remote island, a very remote island national park in Croatia. A lot of people have this belief that as long as you recycle, plastic is fine as long as you recycle. Recycling is not the solution. Recycling is not the solution. In terms of what we put in our recycling bins, the most recycled material tends to be paper and cardboard. Then there's metal, then there's glass. These things are much easier to recycle than plastic. It often comprises of different types of plastic in one. 78 million tons of plastic packaging is produced every year. Only 2% of that is recycled. One of the things that makes it so useful is that it can be manipulated so easily into so many different materials. But this is what makes it so hard to recycle. And some people may disagree, but to me, there's only one time when things actually need to be disposable, and that's like for medical things. But many of the other common things found, bags, cups, bottles, all are things we never needed in the first place. Around 60 million plastic bottles end up in landfill every day. How many of those 60 million do you think we needed? This is an example of what's called a linear economy. Then the other one is a circular economy. You've probably heard the word sustainability or sustainable. This word gets abused by companies a lot because it can mean a lot of things. What it means is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But this concept of a linear economy is completely backwards. We do actually have a responsibility. Whether something's going in the bin or the recycling bin, it still counts as waste that we are creating. There's a popular analogy of like that people use of when the bathroom's flooding, do you mop the floor or do you turn off the tap? Mopping the floor is the whole idea of recycling, basically, whereas turning off the tap is producing less plastic, buying less plastic that you don't need, reusing your stuff if you can, making plastic better so it doesn't break down as easy or it lasts longer. Like, this throwaway culture that we have just really needs to change. It's not a lifestyle that our planet can cope with at all. What is the solution? The solution is don't buy things you don't need, especially if they're made to be thrown away. Before you throw something away, think about it. We need to start thinking of throwing things in the bin as a last resort. For lots of us, it's the first thing we think of. We need to normalise making investments instead of buying the quick and convenient and cheapest, usually disposable option. An example is someone I know needed a new pair of earphones. I just said don't buy the cheapest ones they do. I know how tempting it is because losing your earphones is a very sad time. But anytime I've ever bought the cheap ones, they break in a week or 2 weeks, and because I don't want to throw them out, I have them sitting in my room. But many people will throw them away. Buy the more expensive pair because they're going to last longer and it's going to save you money. In primary school, they will have probably taught you reduce, reuse, recycle. That's very important, and they also come in that order for a reason. Recycle being at the end. You need to reduce, buy less first of all, and if possible refuse it. Someone asks you, do you need a bag? Doesn't take a lot to say no. Reuse, so reuse all your bags. Don't throw your bags away. Bags are just things that are used to carry things. There are plastic-free versions of most things. You can get them for shampoo, conditioner, although I don't really like the conditioner ones. You can get shaving ones, you can get face ones, you can get body ones. You can get ones for everything. You can get bamboo ones of these. Plastic-free versions of things can sometimes be more expensive. What's not more expensive is reusing things. Instead of your disposable razors, you could get an electric one. Instead of face wipes, which are, the actual wipes are plastic, you can buy washable ones. Unless you figured out like a cool, natural DIY makeup remover. I mean, I still buy the plastic ones, so I have a way to go. It's less plastic than having 100 plastic versions of this. I have a pile of packaging envelopes that I keep to reuse when I sell things or when I post things. Like when I get sent things, I keep the package. I used to work in retail and I would just steal the envelopes that they get sent things in. It can save you money. If you know me, you know that I reuse a lot of wrapping paper. I haven't bought wrapping paper in a very long time. When you think about it, wrapping paper is for what? To look nice and then be ripped apart. Is it worth it? And most wrapping paper can't be recycled. Every Christmas we use enough wrapping paper to wrap around the world 9 times. And for what? Also buy things secondhand that might have otherwise ended up in the waste stream. Also, before you throw something away, see if you can sell it. See if it's good enough condition to sell it. Or put it outside your house and put a note saying free on it. Someone might take it. The obvious, use a reusable cup, which actually saves you money. In most coffee shops, use a reusable bottle. As good as these lifestyle things are, clearly businesses have a massive role to play, mainly supermarkets. Number one, because they're making the disposable products that we often have no choice but to buy, like your chicken that comes in plastic. Number two, because above household waste, you have commercial waste. Just doing these lifestyle changes is not enough. Pretty much every video I make is going to end up like this. As vague as this is, we have to put pressure on the businesses that are a massive part of this problem. Like supermarkets, a lot of the times you don't have a choice. What you buy comes in plastic because plastic is such a useful material. Or a lot of the times the alternative is like 3 times as expensive. As much as it's our responsibility, even more it's their responsibility. Also, something I'll talk about again is fashion brands, which also in many cases make single-use items because they make them to not last, so you end up getting rid of them. The bottom line is just make conscious decisions. Get rid of this out of sight, out of mind mentality. That thing you put in the bin has a very long life after you put it in the bin. Make it the last resort. Realise that your actions have consequences. The next one will not be this depressing. But thank you for watching. Thank you if you've ever watched one of my videos. Please keep sharing, because I'm not trying to be famous, but I'm trying to make this whole thing famous. That consisted of a lot of staring into space. No matter how much I plan a video,